So far in the course, we've been preoccupied with creating our 3D model and then subsequently generating a number of views from that model, such as our elevations and our sections. At some point, you're going to want to take each of the views that you've created and customize it in terms of how different elements are displayed, what line styles are used, any surface patterns, any transparency levels, and that's where the visibility and graphic overrides panel comes into play. So I'm just going to start this unit by showing you how to access that panel, and then later on I'll take you through its use step by step and we'll look at all the functions that it contains. So in order to bring up the visibility and graphics override control, you can do it one of two ways. You can either do it from the ribbon, and in which case you need to go to the View menu, and then on the graphics panel up at the top there you've got visibility and graphics. Click on that and you're presented with the main visibility and graphics overrides control panel. This is split into a number of tabs. As I say, I'll take you through each of these in a short while. Just going to put that away for a second. Some of you may like the use of keyboard shortcuts. In Revit, I would suggest you learn at least half a dozen crucial keyboard shortcuts that really will make your use of the software much more efficient. One of those being the keyboard shortcut VV. That brings up the visibility and graphics overrides panel. So all you need to do is make sure you're active in the view you want to customize and then hit VV. Just done that now on my keyboard, and that brings up the visibility and graphics overrides control panel. Now, just before we get into the fine detail of how the visibility and graphics overrides panel works, I just want to very quickly stress again that the settings contained in that panel are view specific. So if we take this particular view, I hit the keyboard shortcut VV, it brings up the panel. I could make some changes here to customize the view. Hit OK, the view would change accordingly, but it would only affect that particular view. I could then switch to a different view and likewise hit VV again, get presented with the same panel, make some changes here, and again this view would now change accordingly. So the visibility and graphics overrides are set on a view by view basis. Okay, let's start taking a look at this panel in detail. You'll notice across the top we've got a number of tabs. Now, some additional tabs may appear on here depending on what you've got in your project, and I'll explain that towards the end of the unit. But you'll always have these basic set of tabs here. I'm just going to start on the left with model categories. Now, if you're coming from AutoCAD, you'll be used to the concept of layers. Categories in Revit are about as close as you're going to get to AutoCAD layers. So we've got a list of Revit categories here, and I'm just going to scroll down. If I go a little slower, give you a flavour of the categories that we have access to. Let's go back up to the top. Now there is a filter there. Now if I look at that little drop down, you've got all the main building disciplines contained within Revit. So make sure your discipline is turned on now, as otherwise it will filter out the categories from that list. So these are model categories. Basically everything in your 3D model, i.e. anything that you'd actually want to be built on site, so your walls, your doors, your roofs, your curtain walling, will be assigned to one of these categories. And one of the great things about Revit is it automatically assigns the elements to the correct categories. So unlike AutoCAD, where you may create a layer for walls and then start drawing on that layer, in Revit all you need to do is start placing walls into your model and they will automatically be assigned or designated against the walls category. And if we have a look down towards the bottom, again we'll find that category there for walls. Now you'll notice in the category list a little plus icon against some of the categories, in fact probably most of them. This is so you can expand the category and see the subcategories. I'm just going to put that away again for a second. So for example, the doors category, if I hit the little plus icon, I get a number of subcategories against that. Now I'm just going to explain very quickly about the primary categories and the subcategories. The primary categories are the ones listed here at the top level. That's what I showed you very quickly before. Now those are hardwired into Revit. Everybody using Revit has the same list of categories. You can't delete any of these categories. You can't create additional categories. You can't rename them. They are hardwired into the system. Again, I see that as a big advantage over AutoCAD, where different users will create their own layer names depending on how they've used the system before. At least with Revit, everybody is working with the same category list because it comes hardwired into the system. However, the subcategories, if I just expand that to show you, these can be customized. You can add additional subcategories to this depending on your needs. Now I would say that subcategories, particularly creating your own, is an advanced topic. It's certainly not really something the beginner should be concerned with, but what it does is give you a real granular control over how your elements are drawn. So you can see there for doors there is a different subcategory for different elements of the doors, and you can apply graphics overrides to each individual subcategory. For the purposes of the beginners course, we're just going to be concerned with applying overrides to the primary categories, so they will change the elements wholesale depending on what categories they sit in. Moving along from the model categories tab to the next one, which is annotation categories. Now everything that goes into your views which helps document and explain the information, such as bits of text, dimensions, tags, they are all annotations, and consequently they go on annotation categories. Now most of these are tags, and I'm going to come on to tags in detail in the next module when we actually look at annotation and detailing. But basically everything that you create to annotate your views will sit on one of these categories, and consequently they can be controlled in terms of their visibility by adjusting the settings in here. Okay, so we've seen that we've got access to a list of categories. So far we've discussed model categories and annotation categories. We've said that the changes we make in this panel only affect the particular view we're working on that's active at the moment, so it's on a view by view basis. So what exactly can we do to these categories? How can we change the graphics in the view? That's what I want to explain now. So if we look, let's say, at the walls category here, so we're in model categories, we've gone down, we're looking at walls. You'll notice a number of columns, and we can click in any of these boxes, so it's almost like a spreadsheet, and as soon as we click in there we have a button called override, and this is where we can set our overrides. Now I'm just going to quickly explain what these different groups here do. So the first group, the three columns here in the first group, projection stroke surface, this affects anything that's seen in projection or on the surface that's not cut through. So an example might be, let's go to a south elevation. If we want to make adjustments to how this wall is displayed in this particular elevation, bring up the visibility and graphics overrides again, let's go down to walls. So that would come under the category, if you like, of projection surface. The lines aren't being cut through, they're not being intersected by the view itself, so we could make some adjustments there. Conversely, the next two columns are in the cut group, so any lines or patterns that are cut through. So going back to a plan, and I'm going to make some adjustments in a second to show you how this works. So we talked earlier in the course about plan views being, if you like, horizontal sections. So the model is actually being cut through. So just bring up the visibility settings again. Let's go back down to walls. So in this case, in this particular view, if we made some graphic overrides here in these two columns, it would affect, just move that over to one side so we can see it, it would affect how this is displayed and how these walls are drawn, because these are actually being cut through. So let's go ahead and make some changes now. So this is not applicable in a plan view because the walls are being cut through, they're not seen in projection. So let's put a graphic override to how the lines for just the walls category are actually displayed in this view. Click on override. I can change the weight. Let's go for quite a thick line weight. Let's change the color. Nice pinkish red. I won't apply a different pattern, so this is going to be the pattern that's set by default, but just to show you, you do have access to any other type of line pattern. Hit OK. Right. Let's go ahead and hit OK on this box. There's a little sort of symbol or graphic of the override that's been applied. Now, just to clarify again, we've set an override to lines that are cut through on the wall category in this particular view. If I hit apply, hit OK, and there we are. Now those lines are dashed. I must have inadvertently applied a different line style. Let's go and check that. And yet accidentally picked one there, so I'll just put that back to no override. So it just showed by example how you can change the line pattern. Hit OK. It's OK. It goes back to a solid line, the default line style. So we haven't changed the wall element. So if I select the wall, here are the properties for the wall itself. Hit edit type. There's nothing in there that's been changed. This is a view specific graphic override. Let's now go back to our elevation and look at how those graphic overrides work in terms of projection and surface. So keyboard shortcut VV. Go down and find the walls category. Now just a couple of other things to note. There is a tick box there against the whole category. That's for the overall visibility. So I can simply turn that off, hit OK, and it turns off the visibility of all the walls in this particular view. So VV again, bring that back up. So you've got overall control of the visibility either on or off just with that tick box there. Now this is an elevation, so the walls are not being cut through. We're seeing them in projection, so we can work with these first three columns here. So I'm going to change the pattern. So the pattern is visible. I'm going to change the color of the pattern and change the pattern itself. Choice of all our installed patterns that were in our Revit template. Hit OK. Hit OK there. And that override has been applied. And zoom in, you can actually see the pattern in detail. So I'm just going to go back, VV, scroll down, find the category entry. Now there is also a column at the end, halftone. I can tick that if we want that to be displayed in a half-tone style. And once more, VV, bring back up the visibility and graphics panel, turn that off. You can also set the detail level. We talked about that in a recent unit down here, the detail level. Remember the fine, medium or coarse. So by default, all the categories will be displayed at their detail level according to the setting down here, but you can override individual categories in terms of their detail level by setting it here. Now the graphics overrides that we're assigning here using this panel only apply to complete categories. We can't use this control here to single out individual elements. So if I just put this away for a second, what I mean by that is if we use that visibility and graphic override panels on this view to apply an override to the walls category, then all the walls, regardless of wall type, would be affected in this view. But let's say we want to just reduce the or increase the transparency of just this single element of wall at the front, then it's no good bringing up that panel and finding the wall category, because that's going to affect all the walls. What you need to do is select the wall in question, right click and override graphics in view just by element. Now you've got access to the same set of overrides, but whatever you adjust there, let's do that, transparency, adjust it up to say 70%, hit OK, only affects that element you've selected. If you select section of wall, override graphics in view by category, and you adjust something here, let's put that again, transparency, OK, it affects all the walls, and that is exactly the same as if you'd gone in here, gone down to walls, and you can see it's just another method of accessing the same button there. So far we've just selected individual categories, i.e. the wall one we just looked at previously, in order to apply our overrides. But there may be instances where you need to select multiple categories and then apply an override to them. So we've got some controls here for making that easier. So again, a single click with the mouse button just selects a category. If you hold the shift button down on your keyboard and then select another category, it will select all the categories in between those two. So I'm going to go ahead and just select a single one again. Conversely, if you hold the control key down on your keyboard, you can now select individual categories without selecting the ones in between. So you can just go through your list, pick the ones you're interested in, and then whatever override you apply will get applied to all those selected categories. If you want to clear those overrides, to get rid of them and put them back to the default state, just go ahead, hit override and clear overrides as the button there, hit OK, and they all go back. So your controls here, if I select none, then none of the categories are selected. I can select them all quickly. So for example, if I wanted to turn off all the categories in a view except an individual one, the quick way of doing that would be use that all button, hit any of those to turn them all off, select none, so none of them are being selected. You can see none of them are currently being displayed, and now I could just turn back on the visibility of the one I'm interested in. So let's reset that, select all the categories, hit any of these, and visibility is turned back on for all of them, and now I can select none. I've also got an invert button there, so if I go ahead and select a number of categories at random, I can hit the invert button and it will swap over between what is selected and what is not selected. And again, now I can just click in any of these to apply a graphic or visibility override to all those selected categories. I'm just going to go ahead and click none to deselect everything. And finally, there's an expand all button which expands all the subcategories. You can see them all now listed there. To finish off this unit, I just want to talk about some of the other tabs you may see in the Visibility and Graphics Overrides panel. So we've really just focused on model categories and annotation categories. However, there are some additional tabs. If we look at the analytical model categories, this is to do with structural analysis. So if you're into Revit structure, then you're going to need to work with that particular tab. Imported categories If you import other CAD files like DWG, DXF files into Revit, they will appear here. So you can see I've got in this project a DWG file called Building Plan, which has been imported in. I am going to show you later on towards the end of the course how to work with external files such as DWG, so I'll cover that in detail then. Filters, this is a really slick advanced feature that allows you to control the visibility and apply graphics overrides depending on the parametric values of some of your elements. So for example, you could create a graphic override based on a filter that colours all the doors which have a fire rating of 30 minutes or more in a certain line style or a certain colour, and you could have that done automatically by setting up a filter and applying a graphic override to it here, and then it would always colour those doors accordingly. So it's like a dynamic graphic override that responds to your model. So a slightly more advanced feature. Revit links, again I'll show you that later in the course. We can actually work with other Revit models. We can link one Revit model inside another. If you do that, it will appear here. So again, you can see I have a Revit model linked inside this one. So project2.rvt is linked inside this project. So you can control the visibility of that linked file through this tab here. And finally, we have a tab for design options. Now, design options is a topic that I will be covering in module 9, and it allows you to explore different design options or different permutations of your design and compare multiple solutions and then decide on which one you want to take forward. As I say, I'll take you through that in detail on a specific unit in module 9, but if you are using design options, then you will have that tab appear, and that's where you can control the display of each option in each specific view. And that completes this unit. To get the most out of this training material, please take the complete course online at bimscape.com. Here you will find a complete learning management system that allows you to work through the course at your own pace. Comprehensive written tutorials provide additional information to that found in the training videos. Mark each unit as complete as you finish it and move on to the next. At any point you can return to any of the units you have previously completed to go over the material again. If you'd like to take this course online, please visit www.bimscape.com/Revit for details.